project is called the Gurgaon Gateway project. We were approached by the client to design a very large multi-tower project in Sector 113, which is a suburb of New Delhi. But upon visiting the site, it was very clear that it was really a greenfield site. Our first step was to establish the quantum of real estate required. We had a brief from the client, we had an area that we had to achieve. And so to understand better how that could be arranged in the site, we go through a number of exercises where we display that real estate in various typologies of design. This process allows us to get a handle on the potential of the massing and the spaces that it can create. At the same time as looking at the overall massing, it's very critical with housing to also look at the detail. So we switch scales from the overall site, the compositional, the spatial qualities, to the actual building block of the project, which is the units themselves. Exploring these with a view to creating exciting spaces, and in this case, double height terraces, great layouts with living dining rooms, optimizing the prime views. We now want to take a series of studies, what I call pressure tests, to see how the master plan performs. The first being the solar orientation study, where we explore, in this case, the summer solstice, and what happens in terms of direct solar exposure as well as shading. What we were looking for is something a little bit more dynamic and organic. We called it the Manhattan effect. The idea that a skyline is a combination of tall, medium and low buildings. The overall effect is one where a more organic appearance comes in, but also the idea that we can tune the skyline to meet certain criteria. So we had to create excess footprint, which then allowed us to sculpt the skyline and bring down towers in a response to view planes, solar orientation, as well as overall compositional value. Another piece of the puzzle was the greenery. This started with the site planning, where the meaningful spaces created by the towers were maximized and unified to create large, consolidated green areas that could really be used for landscaping and common facilities. In addition to that was the idea of bringing greenery up into the building. This would occur via green walls associated with our terraces, creeper walls that are a product of the escape stairs where access to the greenery and maintenance was easy, and finally the horizontal surfaces that are created as a result of our dynamic skyline. Being a project in India, we thought it was also important to respond to local context, to the great history of Indian architecture. We had four concepts that we wanted to translate into our scheme in a modern way. The first was the notion of the ghats, which are the stepped wells that are pervasive throughout India. The idea that the ground plane is a series of steps that lead one to the other, that eventually create an integrated topographical landscape of steps, greenery, planting, as well as poolscape. Ancient architecture of India, the chhatris were these pavilions that were located at the top of the palaces. And the reason for that location was twofold. One was to take in the greater winds that occur up there, but the other was the wonderful viewpoint that you had from an elevated position. The third concept was the notion of jarrokas. Jarrokas are what we would call bay windows. They are features that project out from the normal facade. They create a small space that in itself is an internal experience, but they also often have screens that protect them from sunlight or possible views in. The final traditional element that we want to incorporate was the notion of jali. A jali is a perforated screen, most often carved out of stone. The screen performs, again, a solar function, keeping sun out of the interiors, provides glare control as well as privacy. But as always with architecture, it's not just the individual elements that make the difference, it's how they all come together. When you stand back from Gurgaon Gateway project, what you end up with is something that is the product of the process, but ultimately we appreciate as a total environment. The notion of this skyline that delicately weaves its way up and down, exposing skies in various ways. The understanding that the groundscape is actually three-dimensional, steps up, it negotiates levels for podiums, for functions, facilities, and the integration of greenery throughout the building, not just on the garden at the ground floor. This project was a great success for us at the design studio. It showed the ability to think strategically about issues that are relevant to both developer as well as end user. It showed that with interesting approaches we can undermine what is often seen as a default position on how to develop a large site, a huge amount of real estate. And ultimately, I believe that when you look at the outcome of the process, it is developed into a very lyrical project, one which is a bit more organic, maybe a bit more sensitive to the way our cities ought to be, both in terms of overall morphology, how the buildings actually relate to each other, skyline that is varied, and the idea that greenery can be a part of the overall landscape and beyond just the gardens.